A school hallway, a girl in a wheelchair. A bully pushes her to the ground and laughs. But just minutes later, a quiet boy steps forward. And what he does shocks the entire school. It all started with a scream in the hallway. Not the kind of scream that comes from excitement or surprise, but one filled with shock, fear, and pain. Students turned their heads. A few dropped their phones. Others paused mid-conversation. The usually loud and chaotic school hallway suddenly fell into an eerie silence. Eyes widened as everyone rushed toward the sound. In the center of the hallway, surrounded by a ring of stunned students, lay a girl named Emily. Emily was no stranger to being noticed, but not like this. She was the girl with the kind eyes, always offering a gentle smile or a helping hand when someone dropped a pencil or struggled with their locker. She moved through life a little differently than others, not by walking, but by rolling. Emily used a wheelchair, and that day it was lying sideways on the floor. Her books and backpack were scattered in all directions, and Emily, she was on the ground, trembling, holding back tears. What could have caused this? The answer stood nearby, smirking. His name was Tyler. Everyone knew Tyler. Big, loud, cocky. He walked through school like he owned it. Teachers tried to manage him, but he always found a way to slip past consequences. He was the kind of bully who targeted the quiet ones, the different ones, the ones he thought couldn't fight back. And on that day, Tyler picked Emily. She hadn't provoked him. In fact, she had only been trying to get to her next class, rolling down the hallway as she always did, with a stack of books on her lap and her headphones around her neck. But Tyler, looking for attention, or maybe just entertainment, stepped right into her path. "What's the rush, Wheels?" he sneered, standing tall in front of her. Emily tried to maneuver around him politely. "Excuse me," she said softly, but Tyler wasn't interested in letting her pass. Instead, with a loud, cruel laugh, he gave the side of her wheelchair a hard shove. It tipped, and in an instant, Emily fell. A gasp echoed down the hallway, and then nothing. No one moved. Some students were too shocked to react. Others turned away, pretending they hadn't seen anything. A few even laughed nervously, unsure of how to process what had just happened. Emily looked up from the ground, face red, not just from the pain of falling, but from the humiliation of being hurt in front of everyone. She tried to reach for her chair, but it was too far, too heavy. Her hands trembled as she reached for her books instead. Still, no one helped. But not everyone stayed frozen. At the far end of the hallway, someone had seen everything. A boy named Marcus. Marcus wasn't loud. He didn't stand out. Most days he was just another face in the crowd. But Marcus had something not everyone had, a strong sense of what's right and what's wrong, and what he had just witnessed was so wrong. It made his chest burn with anger. He didn't wait for someone else to step up. He didn't hope a teacher would come running. He took a deep breath, pushed through the crowd, and walked straight toward Emily. But before helping her up, Marcus turned to Tyler. The hallway watched. "Why'd you do that?" Marcus asked, his voice calm but firm. Tyler raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Why do you care?" Marcus didn't flinch. "Because she didn't deserve that, and neither does anyone else." Tyler chuckled. "You gonna fight me or something?" But Marcus didn't raise his fists. He didn't need to. "I don't need to fight you. You already lost the moment you picked on someone who couldn't fight back." The crowd grew louder. Now, whispers turning into support. Some kids nodded. A few started clapping. Phones were recording. Marcus knelt beside Emily and gently helped her sit up. He picked up her books, placed them neatly in her lap, and helped her back into her wheelchair. Emily looked at him, stunned. "Thank you," she whispered. Marcus just smiled. "You don't have to thank me. No one should ever go through that, alone." And for the first time that day, Emily smiled too. What had started with a scream ended with a moment of true courage, and the hallway that once stayed silent finally found. Just down the hall, a boy named Marcus saw the whole thing. He had been leaning against his locker, earbuds in, scrolling through his phone, when he heard the scream. At first, he thought it was just another loud moment in a busy school day. But when he looked up, his heart sank. He saw Emily on the floor. He saw her wheelchair on its side. He saw her struggling to sit up, books scattered around her like broken pieces of something sacred, and he saw Tyler, laughing. Something inside Marcus snapped. He wasn't the kind of kid who got into trouble. He didn't chase popularity, and he definitely didn't step into drama. Most days, people barely noticed. Him. He liked it that way. Quiet mornings, drawing in his notebook, keeping his circle small. But that day was different. His stomach turned. His fists clenched. His breathing quickened. He had seen Tyler bully kids before, mocking them, shoving their books, making cruel jokes. And he hated it. But he always told himself it wasn't his place. This time, he couldn't walk away. Marcus pulled his earbuds out and pushed off the locker. Each step felt heavy but driven, like something greater than anger was carrying him forward. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, but his face was calm, focused. All eyes followed him. The hallway, still buzzing from the shock of what happened, shifted its attention. Whispers rippled through the students. Phones turned toward Marcus. Some kids gasped. Others said his name quietly like they couldn't believe what he was doing. But Marcus didn't stop. He walked right up to Tyler. They were nearly the same height, but Tyler always seemed bigger, louder, more aggressive, filled with the kind of false confidence bullies often have. Marcus stood just inches away, staring him down. "Pick on someone who fights back," he said, voice steady and low. Tyler tilted his head, amused. "Excuse me?" he chuckled, glancing around like this was a joke. "You heard me," Marcus said, louder now. "You think it's tough to knock over someone who can't defend herself?" Tyler scoffed, trying to shake it off. "What are you gonna do, huh? You gonna fight me?" His laugh echoed in the hallway, but something had changed. The crowd wasn't laughing with him. In fact, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. The students who once stayed silent were now murmuring. Some had phones up recording. Others were looking at each other like, "Is this really happening?" Marcus didn't flinch. "I don't need to fight you," he said, eyes locked on Tyler. "You already showed everyone who you are." The words hit harder than a punch. Tyler blinked. He wasn't used to people standing up to him, especially not someone like Marcus, someone who had always flown under the radar. The silence that followed felt heavier than any scream. It was the sound of realization, the sound of truth, and Tyler hated it. He tried to brush past Marcus, to leave like it didn't matter. But Marcus stepped aside, not in fear, but in strength. Then, without another word to Tyler, Marcus turned to Emily. He knelt down, gently helping her gather her books. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" Emily nodded, still a bit shaken, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." Marcus gave her a small smile. "No one should treat you like that, not here, not anywhere." Another student helped lift the wheelchair. Marcus carefully helped Emily back into it. Her hands still trembled, but her eyes had hope again. From the corner of his eye, Marcus could see Tyler backing away, mumbling something about not being worth it, as he disappeared into the crowd. But it wasn't about Tyler anymore. It was about Marcus. And Emily, and the dozens of kids now seeing something they hadn't seen before, that you don't need to be loud to be powerful, and you don't need fists to fight for what's right. Students started clapping, not all at once, but one by one, then more. A ripple of applause spread down the hallway, as if everyone had been waiting for someone, anyone, to take the first stand. And Marcus? He didn't smile like a hero. He didn't look for attention. He just nodded at Emily, stepped aside, and quietly walked away. But in that moment, he wasn't just a boy who helped. He became a voice for everyone who'd ever been pushed down and needed someone to speak up. Marcus didn't throw a punch. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. He stood tall, shoulders squared, eyes locked on Tyler with unwavering calm. His presence alone cut through the tension like a blade. Students in the hallway stopped mid-step. Conversations dropped to whispers. A ripple of quiet spread as people began to realize something was happening. Something important. Emily sat on the ground, her wheelchair tipped over beside her, books scattered across the hallway floor. Her hands were scraped, and her eyes darted, around, wide with shock and embarrassment. Tyler, who had always strutted through the school like he owned it, stood over her, smirking like he had just pulled off the world's greatest joke. Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself between Tyler and Emily. "Leave her alone," he said firmly, his voice steady but low, the kind of tone that made people listen. "You think this makes you tough? Hurting someone who can't fight back?" Tyler scoffed, trying to laugh it off. "Relax, man. It was just a joke. She's fine." Marcus didn't blink. That wasn't a joke. That was bullying. The smirk faded slightly from Tyler's face, replaced by a twitch of unease. He glanced. Around, the crowd was growing. Students were pulling out their phones, recording, streaming, capturing every second. And now, they weren't cheering for Tyler. They weren't laughing with him. They were watching Marcus. Some began to boo. A few shouted, "Not cool, Tyler." Others clapped softly, then louder, until a wave of support spread through the hallway. The atmosphere shifted, charged with something new, courage. Tyler opened his mouth to fire back, but Marcus ignored him. He bent down, gently lifting Emily's wheelchair upright. Then he helped her sit back in it, checking to make sure she was okay. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." Marcus gave her a small smile, then turned to collect her books one by one. He handed them to her carefully, as if returning something precious. Then he straightened and turned back to the crowd. His voice rang out clearly. "We all saw it. Every one of you." Silence fell again. The cameras were still recording. Tyler stood frozen, face paling slightly. "If you stay silent," Marcus continued, "you're part of the problem." The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. A few heads nodded. Someone said, "He's right." More murmurs followed. Some people lowered their phones, ashamed. Others stepped closer to Emily, offering help, asking if she was okay. It was as if Marcus had given them permission to do what they knew was right all along. Tyler stepped back, the smug look on his face crumbling. "You think you're some kind of hero?" he muttered, bitterness creeping into his voice. Marcus turned to him, calm and unshaken. "No, just someone who's not afraid to speak up." Tyler looked like he wanted to say more, but the moment had turned. The crowd wasn't on his side anymore. He shoved his hands into his pockets and stalked off down the hall, muttering curses under his breath. A teacher finally arrived, breathless, having caught wind of the commotion. She looked at Emily, then at Marcus, and then at the crowd. She didn't have to ask what had happened. The hallway told the story, the silence, the stares, the phones. Marcus helped guide Emily toward the classroom. As they moved, more students joined them, not to gawk but to walk with them, a quiet show of solidarity. For Emily, it was the first time in a long time she didn't feel invisible. For Marcus, it wasn't about attention or glory. It was about doing the right thing, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. And for Tyler, it was more than just a moment of humiliation. It was a wake-up call. In the days that followed, something shifted at school. People talked more, openly about respect, kindness, and standing up. Teachers brought it into discussions. Students formed a support group. And though the world hadn't changed overnight, a seed had been planted, all because one student decided to stand tall and speak. Marcus didn't throw a punch, he didn't shout, he didn't have to. He stood tall, steady, and strong, placing himself between Tyler and Emily, whose wheelchair now lay on its side. Books were scattered across the floor like debris after a storm. The hallway, which moments before had been buzzing with chatter, fell into an uneasy silence. All eyes were on them. "Leave her alone," Marcus said, voice calm but firm. "You think this makes you tough? Hurting someone who can't fight back?" Tyler scoffed and crossed his arms, pretending not to care. "It was just a joke, man. She'll be fine." But there was no laughter this time. No one backing him up. A few students had started recording the incident on their phones. Others stood frozen, watching, uncertain of what would happen next. Marcus took a step forward, his gaze unwavering. "No, it wasn't a joke. You knocked her over, Tyler. That's not funny. That's cruel." Tyler shifted uncomfortably. He glanced around, suddenly aware that the usual smirks and nods from his crowd were gone. A few students had started booing. Someone muttered, "What's wrong with you?" Another clapped, just once. But it echoed in the quiet hallway, and others followed. Ignoring Tyler, Marcus bent down and gently helped Emily back into her wheelchair. He moved carefully, checking to make sure she wasn't hurt. Her hands were scraped, her breathing shaky, but she managed a small nod. He picked up her books next, one by one, and placed them on her lap. "Thank you," Emily whispered, eyes shining not with tears, but gratitude. Marcus turned back to the crowd. "We all saw what happened," he said, raising his voice so everyone could hear. "You don't get to pretend it didn't happen just because it's easier to look away." People shifted on their feet. The cameras were still rolling. A few students lowered their phones, suddenly uncomfortable. Others held them up a little higher, realizing something meaningful was unfolding. "If you stay silent," Marcus continued, "you're part of the problem." The hallway was still, like everyone was holding their breath. For a second, no one moved. And then a few more students began to clap. A girl stepped forward and handed Emily one of her pens that had rolled under a locker. Another offered to walk with her to class. Tyler stood off to the side, hands shoved into his pockets, his face red. He looked like he wanted to say something, an insult maybe, or a defense, but nothing came out. The moment had turned. He wasn't the center anymore. Marcus didn't even look at him. His focus was on Emily and the students now gathering around, creating a quiet wall of support. The bell rang, breaking the tension, but the atmosphere didn't return to normal. Not exactly. Something had changed. Marcus walked beside Emily down the hallway, surrounded by classmates who had found the courage to care out loud. He hadn't yelled or fought, but he had done something harder. He had spoken up, clearly and with conviction, and that had made all the difference. Today, Marcus says he doesn't want to be called a hero. "I just did what was right," he says, his voice calm but resolute. "If you see someone being hurt, don't just film it. Don't just watch. Help them. Speak up." To him, it was a simple decision, a moment that demanded action. But to everyone else, it was something extraordinary. That one moment in the hallway, one act of courage, changed everything. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday, during the usual chaos between classes. Students spilled into the hallways, the sound of slamming lockers and chattering voices filling the air. Amid the noise and movement, a girl in a wheelchair tried to navigate her way through the crowd. Her name was Emily, and she had just transferred to the school a few weeks earlier. Most students barely noticed her, but someone did notice: Jason, a notorious bully who had made a reputation for targeting those who couldn't fight back. With a smug grin and a cruel flick of his arm, Jason knocked her books from her lap. Then, without remorse, he bumped the back of her wheelchair, sending it veering sideways. Emily gasped as her chair spun and struck the lockers. A hush fell across the hallway, followed by a chorus of murmured laughter. Some students pulled out their phones, ready to record another viral moment. That's when Marcus stepped forward. He didn't raise his fists. He didn't shout. Instead, he walked over to Emily, knelt beside her, and gently gathered her books. He made sure she was okay, speaking softly, offering comfort. Then he stood and turned to Jason, not with anger, but with strength in his voice. "That's enough," Marcus said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We don't treat people like this. Not here. Not anywhere." Jason scoffed and rolled his eyes, muttering something under his breath before storming off. The crowd watched in stunned silence. No one had expected anyone, let alone quiet, easygoing Marcus, to stand up to a bully like Jason. But he did, not with fists, but with heart. Word of what happened spread quickly. The video some students had taken didn't focus on the cruelty, it focused on the kindness. The clip of Marcus helping Emily, speaking up and standing firm, became a symbol of something powerful: courage, compassion, character. The next day, students greeted Marcus differently. Teachers thanked him. Emily smiled brighter. And though he shrugged off the praise, saying he just did what anyone should do, everyone knew it meant more. Sometimes change starts with a rule or a law, but sometimes it starts with a single act of kindness, a moment when someone decides that silence isn't enough. Marcus didn't act to be a hero, but in doing the right thing, he became one. And because of him, Others began to believe they could do the same. Don't forget to subscribe for more interesting videos.